All right, we're recording, and I am here with Jeannette Bedard. Did I say your last name right? I'm sorry if I
Bedard,
didn't.
yeah,
Awesome. Okay, close enough. Um, Jeannette, is this your third time on the podcast?
it is.
It is, because you were on with Angela Ackerman,
Mhm,
which that was fantastic.
mhm.
Angela was great. And then you were on, did you come to a book club?
Yeah, to the Guardians of the Galaxy.
That's
Woman.
right, to the Guardians of the Galaxy outline. That's right. And this is perfect for Guardians of the Galaxy because we're looking at a sci-fi piece today.
Yeah.
So it nails it. Um, yeah, so tell me a little bit about the piece we're looking at. You sent me this, and I loved reading it. It's so fun and like just good, strong adventure sci-fi, which was great.
Yeah, so this is Far Future Space Opera, and this is
Nice.
book. This is the first chapter of book two. So a whole bunch of adventures have just happened.
Okay.
In it, the heroes, I guess, have a Winnebago space-worthy ship, and they're just fleeing from a battle cruiser.
Love it. Very
Um,
Spaceballs.
yeah, it's not totally serious.
Okay.
Um,
I love it.
the Oren is the point of view character, and he's a 50-something, was a pilot when he was young and ended up in middle management.
Okay.
And ultimately, he ended up, a war broke out in the galaxy where they are, and he ended up running a code breaking unit.
Nice.
And Vina was someone who worked in the code breaking unit. And
Awesome.
Vina's daughter has been kidnapped, and they are working together to try to get her back.
You said this is the second book. Is the
This
first
is
book
the book two.
published?
Book one will be coming out this summer, and I'm actually going to serialize it.
Awesome.
And so
Very
I've set
cool.
up a Substack, and it'll be coming out that way first. And then ultimately,
Awesome.
I'll package it up into a book form.
That's so fun. That's fantastic. What's the name of book one?
It's Fractured Orbits,
Fractured
and
Orbits. Okay.
book two will be the Alien Algorithm.
Awesome. Okay. So let's talk about it. I'm going to share my screen so we can look at it together. I things I immediately loved. Let's get in. Let's get into that. You've got four characters in this scene: Oren, Vina, Nigel, and Click. And Click is an octopus. So that's how. Well, it's kind of a starfish, is how I pictured him. Am I picturing him correctly?
In this universe, there's a really popular children's comic called Bubble and Click. And it's
Okay.
like a little girl and this octopus-like alien who have adventures.
Gotcha.
And Vina had came across Click in her adventures,
Okay.
and immediately they don't know what the alien's name is, but they called it.
They call him Click. Yeah, which is a great name for an alien sidekick that may or may not be sentient. I mean, he is, but
Well, he's
yeah,
definitely sentient. He
yeah.
actually facilitated their recent escape. So
Okay, so he definitely is.
yeah, but what they
Gotcha.
don't know is that Click is a child as well.
Oh,
But
nice.
the adults don't. The humans don't know this.
That's awesome. I love it. Will they find out along the way?
Along the way, yes.
Are his parents ginormous? That's always one of my favorite tropes in sci-fi is like when you meet the kid and then the parent is like 1,000 feet tall.
The adults are much larger and much scarier.
Nice. I love it. I love that. So you're using him really well. Nonverbal characters are tough. He clicks and pops and changes color. He may not pop. I might have just added the pop. He clicks and changes color,
Yes.
which is great. You're using Vina really well. Her voice is, she's very chill, very much like it's going to be okay. She's got a good swing to her. I do want to talk to you a little bit about Oren's voice because I couldn't quite tell what you were going for. So I just want to nail that down a little bit. So let's start off with these conversations you have going on between Oren and Click. And I'm going to scroll down and look at one real quick because they're fun. So here's a good one. Oren pursed his lips. It seemed like the little alien wanted to communicate, but the big eyes and bold colors added to the child's toy more than anything else. But Vina was convinced the alien was intelligent. Sorry, but I don't know what you mean. As an excuse to break eye contact with Click, he changed the scans to infrared spectrum. The perspective added nothing, so he changed it back to visual. Lifting themselves up on their tentacles, Click's entire body flashed red, and then they let out a loud click. They lifted one tentacle and pointed to the anchor world, a gesture Oren could decipher. So you've got these like spaced all the way through of Oren having this Well, then Oren says, yeah, good idea. Narrowed the scanner to focus on the planet. You've got this conversation going through the whole scene between Oren and Click, who's sitting in the co-pilot seat, but Click doesn't actually talk. And I loved it for a couple reasons. One, it lends to a ton of comedic humor. It's really great as like Oren tries to figure out what's happening. It's really good. Two, it allows Oren to play off of somebody while he's alone in a cockpit. So that's great as well. And his whole like constantly assuming he knows what click means is also great, right? Like, so you get this kind of like device to express the emotions of the moment, and add to the like comedic tension at the same time, which is really nice. Very Han and Chewie, right? Where Han is always talking about Chewie, and Chewie is always like just yelling back like weird nonverbals, and well, they're verbal, but like nonsensical like roars, and Han is like answering with like I know, as like as if he speaks Wookiee, which is really funny. But anyway, it's a nice yeah, it was really nicely done. I liked it. My where I want to push you is we lose Click a lot in the piece. So, especially toward the end, when Vina comes in, there's lots of moments where not lots, there were several moments where you either do what you do here, which is just tell us what Nigel thinks Click means. So, like, for example, the debris was coming too fast. It felt like a video game out of control, and he was playing with their lives. A wave of dread washed over him as the bead of sweat dripped down his forehead. He was teetering on the ends of control. One misstep, and he would kill them all. Fantastic paragraph, by the way. Nigel materialized between the seats. Click would like to take the controls. So this is also a great device, right? Like Nigel being able to interpret for Click. It's like C3PO and R2D2, right? Like C3PO constantly telling everybody what R2 is beeping and buzzing about, but we need to see R2 beep and buzz. So we need Click here to like make sounds and have Oren ignore him. And if you, depending on how much you want to up the comedic tension, you want Click to make sounds. You want Oren to like yell like not now. You want Click to make more sounds, like roll around and make more colors. You want Oren to yell not now, and then you want Nigel to appear and be like, hey, right? Because that's going to add to that like buddy comedy type thing going on in the cockpit in this piece. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I guess I should have mentioned that Nigel is a repurposed AI that can project himself as a hologram.
I figured it out about halfway through. That was a second thing I was going to talk to you about. Was we need an introduction for Nigel because he just appears, even though this is the second book, and right, like, is this the second chapter in the second book?
This is the first chapter in the second book.
First chapter, yeah. So you absolutely have to introduce Nigel, because as much as you want people to read the first book, you cannot guarantee that this chapter will not be their entrance to the world. So Vina and Oren, I don't need more detail on in this chapter because I understand them from their voices. I can like figure out their emotions. I understand like who they are. You slowly reveal that they're running away from somebody. That's all really great. Nigel, though, just materializes between the two seats, and he's speaking for Click. So I just need to know who he is. And, you know, I think a single sentence in there, and you can do it one of two ways. One way, well, let me ask you this. How does Oren feel about Nigel?
Oren met Nigel probably a couple hours before this.
Okay.
Nigel was a steward on a Titanic-like futuristic ship.
Okay.
He basically looks like a Victorian gentleman, so he's a little bit strange.
Nice. I love it.
But Nigel helped them get out of the previous situation that they were in, so Oren's pretty positive about him.
Okay, so Oren likes Nigel.
Yeah.
Awesome. How does Oren feel about Click?
So this is the first time Oren has seen Click.
Okay.
But Click, he knows that Click helped them escape and was warned that Click would be there. And Click is a familiar child's character, so not scary.
Gotcha.
Not like a xenomorph is sitting there about to help out. Instead, it's a cute little character.
Gotcha. So he's maybe a little confused by Click.
Yeah, it's a little weird, but not scary.
Maybe a little dismissive of Click.
Maybe, yeah.
Okay. I'm asking these questions because how Nigel responds verbally to them, how Oren responds verbally to them is going to tell us not just how Oren feels about them, but it's going to tell us about Oren as well. Right. So you said Oren is like in his 50s and has kind of been passed over for promotions. How would you describe his personality?
He tends to be wordy.
So like he talks a lot?
Yeah. And he recently, in this war that just ended, he lost his wife in a bombing. And so he's sort of been broken. And this is the first time that he's actually gone back to something that he actually enjoys, because he enjoyed piloting so much when he was younger.
Gotcha. Does the first book end with their escape?
Yes.
Okay, that makes sense. So Oren's a major character in the first book too.
Yes. Yeah, he's a POV character.
Okay. How would so Oren's lost his wife in the war. He's kind of taking on this new life in the first book. He's older. Would you describe him as grizzled or enjoying the new adventure?
At this point, he's come around to enjoy the new adventure.
Okay, so he's into it.
Yeah.
Is he surprisingly energetic for his age or tired all the time?
Probably more on the tired all the time category.
Yeah. Would he rather have a smooth and gentle ride to the next planet or be in the middle of a firefight?
Much rather the smooth and gentle ride than.
Okay. So what's interesting about Oren is that, and he's been shot here.
Yeah, he's been grazed on his arm. Yeah.
Okay. How does he feel about being shot?
Not so keen on that.
Okay. Yeah. Well, I asked because he could be like, oh my gosh, I was shot. This is the best. So much better than the desk. But yeah, but that's not, he's going the other way. He's like, I can't believe I was just shot.
Yeah, and now he's going to fly because he's shot. Yeah.
Yeah. So if we were building a character wheel for Oren, we are meeting Oren in this book in the middle of a modulation. Okay. Right? Because he's stressed and he's anxious and he's been shot.
Yeah.
So we need more of that from his voice, and these moments with Nigel and Click is where we need it. So Nigel appears and Nigel materialized between two seats. Click would like to take the controls, right? And Orange says, are you mad? Which is great. Orange didn't take his eyes off the path. And the pain from his shoulder was only getting worse. And then you have Click admitting a series of clicks here, pulling Oren from his focus. You have the Buttercup, the ship they're in, shuddered a piece of something bounced off the hull. And then Vina came in and said, let's try Click. I need Oren here to like respond to what's going on. Right. And I didn't know how to make it. I just put a stop distracting me, Oren roared. But we need some kind of like emotive response. And I would actually have it toward everybody, right? Like the stop distracting me is pointed at Click because I was kind of playing up the relationship between him and Click. So maybe a better line would be like, I need everybody just to back off for a couple minutes while I get us out of here, right? Like something that expresses that Oren is frustrated. And then Vina says, let Click try. And Oren's like, fine. And I actually think there needs to be a little more argument there, right? Because what's really nice about the piece, like I said before, is you've got this great like back and forth between the characters, but we need to slow it down and we need to stretch it out. And because this is a big cast scene where you've got 4 characters interacting, we care about the emotions of all 4 of them. And so let's come up to the top. They've just escaped and he's pretty sure they're about to be chased, but the chase hasn't started yet, right? So let's just look at Oren's words. That's sorry. Is that an alien? Oren yelled over his shoulder as the alien moved toward him. That's Click, Vina replied. from the common cockpit. Right. Oren stared at Click, the little flash. Hello, Click. Nice to meet you. Sorry, I'm rushing over words there just to get to the dialogue. So that's Click. Right. Hello, Click. Nice to meet you. That all sounds very like calm, right? Like, and very together. I can't necessarily tell from his words that he's injured, he's in pain, or he's anxious, right? Like, so adding a couple, adding just a little bit of emotion to the dialogue instead of right, maybe great, or instead of right, maybe like fantastic, right? Whatever you think is going to is going to be in Oren's voice from the first book to modulate into this moment. And then you've got hello, Click. Nice to meet you. And you said he talks a lot. So
Yeah,
for somebody who
he's
talks,
talker.
yeah. So we want to give him like every time he expresses something, you want to give him a couple sentences at least, right? Like, so I would say that like if I'm writing a talker under normal circumstances, you want to give him like 3 to 4 sentences at a time, like 2 to 4 ideally. But then in a moment of anxiety, they're either going to talk less or they're going to talk more. My sense from how you've written Oren is that he's going to talk less in moments of stress. So we want to drop him here down to like 2, but we definitely want to give him 2, right? Like, so, right. Hello, Click. Nice to meet you. Why don't you take a seat, buckle in. It's going to be a bumpy ride.
Right.
Like something of that nature that like lets us know like he's talking, and it'll be nice because it'll pull him away from Vina's voice. Right now he and Vina sound very similar, right? Like they're both very chill, they're both very relaxed, and Vina is also just short, quick sentences, right? Like, so by giving Oren a little bit more of a cadence, more words to say, more sentences stretched together, then we start to distinguish their voices a little bit. So like right here, he said, he pushes through the pain. He had no choice. Now let's get out of here. Right. I love the self-talk because he's not talking to Click. He's just like talking to himself, which is fantastic for this kind of like sci-fi pilot because it allows you in the middle of a like flight like this where he's running away, it lets him express emotion all the time. So having that like self-talk is great. It's another Han Solo trick, right? Like Han Solo is constantly muttering to himself or like saying things out loud, and it makes for a great character because we always know how he's feeling, right? Like there's nothing secret about Hans, and it fills space. When we're like talking about him darting in and out of ships, him talking to himself like fills the lines with dialogue that keeps us engaged. So it's really nice that you did that, but give him more words. Right? Like, let's get out of here. Any plan it'll do. Just need one close. God, my shoulder hurts. Right? Like something of that nature where he's just like saying it all at once to get his voice expanded a little bit so he can feel like that talker. Now, is he talking, when he talks, is he talking about things he observes in the world, the way that he feels, or like terrible things happening to him?
More along the way he feels and things he's observing.
Okay, great. Yeah, so that would be let's get out of here. Any plan it'll do. God, my shoulder hurts. Hopefully this will come quick, right? Like some kind of line. That's a terrible line, but when you're a great writer, so it'll come out fine. So get that like dialogue stretched a little bit for him though. Yeah, so we talked about Click and Oren. Oh, where's that first interaction? Okay, so here we have this conversation with him and his old commander.
Yes.
You did a really great job here of not overwhelming me with details, which I thought was great, right? Because I know in sci-fi like this, especially in a space opera where you have like unlimited pages, it's super tempting just to like give everyone's backstory in a paragraph the minute they talk. So it was really great. What we're missing though is the back and forth of that dance between the two of them, because his commander speaks and then he doesn't actually reply.
Yeah, he just turns her off.
He just turns her off. So for a talker, we need to see that conversation between them, because that conversation is going to tell us how he feels about her, how she feels about him, right? Like, again, just stretch it out. And it's a space opera. You got nothing but pages, right? Stretch the whole thing out. So here, for example, Oren, Acton, the external comms came to life. Oren flinched. His General Swaz's face appeared in the middle of the screen, completely blocking his view. Every part of him wanted to hide and put his head under the face. Instead, he cleared his throat and faced her. Now we need a line, right? General, how you doing? Got this ship, right? Like some kind of excuse, like no big deal. It's going to be fine. We'll be right back. Don't worry about us, right? Like something that like indicates how he's feeling about their escape and what he wants her to think, right? Like, and then she can say, if you don't return to the Defiant immediately, we'll declare you a traitor. As she spoke, a little wads of spit formed at the edges of her lips, right? Oren's got, like, we need a reply from Oren there. Like, okay, don't really know how to fly this. Turn it around 1 second. And then he can look at Click and he'd be like, Click, you turn her off, right? Like, and that's when he can like have this side conversation. And it's great because it's one of those kind of classic sci-fi moments. Like, I think the one that comes to mind the most for me is, have you ever seen the sci-fi spoof Galaxy Quest?
Yes.
Yeah. So the big like villain commander pops up on their like holodeck screen at some point, and Captain Taggart starts talking about how like he looks at somebody who's like, hey, put him on mute or something like that. And then he starts talking about like, I want you to load up all our torpedoes and fire at him and blah, 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 blah. And then he looks back at him and the guy's still like sitting there looking at him. He's like, I told you to turn him off. And they're like, we didn't know how. Like, so it's that funny comedic moment of like, I'm going to stall or I'm going to talk to the side, or, and you've got a great kind of rhythm going there for that. So I think just blowing it out a little bit more and letting them talk more to each other is going to tell us more about their relationship. It is going to satisfy the lack of information. Does that make sense? So like satisfy the lack, that gap, because what we don't want to do is turn around and dump like 2 paragraphs of info in here. So
I'm trying hard not to info dump.
Yeah. And you did a really great job of not info dumping on me. So, and you know, if you had, I would have cut all those paragraphs out because you and I hang out enough that you would have known I did that. So this is great that you didn't do that, but we do need them talking a little bit more. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Okay. Now that I know that he talks a lot, I made a note here that long sentences like this are a problem. If we have long sentences up here, down here, it sounds like his voice, not that it's different. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Yeah. So we just, that consistency will explain some of that away. Okay. Sorry, I'm going to look back at my list. We talked about Oren's voice. We talked about how Oren feels about Click and Nigel. Does Nigel have an emotional palette?
Yeah, he's basically a Pinocchio character.
Oh.
He's programmed to do one thing, and now he's doing all sorts of other things.
Nice.
Struggling with that a bit. So
I love that. How does his voice display his emotions? He gets what?
He gets fussier. Like he's basically a Victorian valet who's translating for an alien. And so he gets fussier.
I want to see that in this chapter. I want to see it right away. So like down here, Nigel materializes between the 2 seats. Click, would you turn off the controls? Are you mad? Oh man, give us a response from Nigel in there.
Okay.
Right. What's great about these 4, about having 4 very distinct personalities like you have here in this big cast scene, is that you can have more than one conversation going at a time. You should have more than one conversation going at a time, right? Like, so this idea that Nigel is going to complain about having to translate for a cartoon octopus is really fun and entertaining. So as he says, are you mad? Have Nigel like comment on the fact that he has to translate for a weird small octopus in his like Victorian fussy voice. And then you can get this and click admitted a series to draw Oren's focus, and then you can have Oren roar at everyone, right? Like, so
Yeah.
you get this whole back and forth between all of them where Nigel's talking about uh how he has to translate for an alien, and Venus talking about how maybe Oren should just set aside, and Click is buzzing and clicking, and then Oren can kind of like stop it all with this big roar, and then you can have Vina come back and be like, really, you need, like, it'll be better for your shoulder if you get down, give the alien a chance. And then have Nigel say something else about, like, you know, everybody cares about the alien, nobody asks me if I can fly a plane, right? Like, so there's that like passing the ball around a lot to get them all talking more. Does that make sense?
Mm-hmm.
How does that feel?
Good.
Okay. um yeah, so no, I don't want to talk about it. That's just me adding stuff in. Let's talk about where you're putting dialogue tags. So
Yeah. I
you
listened to the dialogue tag podcast this morning.
it's really funny. I forgot that we posted. I posted that today. So yeah. So let's talk about it. I just want you to be a little more strategic with them. So I would actually say your dialogue tags are not a distraction, but I also don't think you're using them to. I think if you use them a little bit differently, you can really escalate the pace of
I actually try to
piece.
avoid using them.
Yeah, I think that's really smart, except when you're in a 4-person scene,
Yeah.
and then you can't avoid it. Then you have to use them at least occasionally, especially since part of what you're doing in the scene, especially toward the end, is you're leaving out 2 voices. We lose Nigel and Click, and it just becomes Oren and Vina talking. And I would say Oren and Vina are, well, at least Oren is your straight man, right? Like, the humor is going to come, the engagement's going to come from Nigel and Click. So we need to keep, and Vina some, so we need to keep them talking. And Oren, because he's the POV, is going to play off of all of them. So yes, I agree, in a 2-person conversation, just not having them as much as possible is great. But in a big cast scene like this, you can't erase them. You got to get them in there, unless you can really hardcore define. Unless you make Nigel sound 10 times more proper than he does,
Right.
then you've got 4 distinct voices, because you're giving Oren long sentences, Vina short sentences that are always optimistic in like the way things are going. Click is clicking, and Nigel would sound I don't want, the word older keeps coming to mind, but more formal. If you can pull that off, then you can not use dialogue tags. But with 4 people in the scene, you got to use them. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Yeah. So when we use them, let's be strategic about them. So like, sometimes you're great with them. Like right here, Oren frowned. Do you seriously think whatever the code says is worth the hassle of bringing us in? Oren frowned, fantastic dialogue tag. I know who's talking. You put it at the front of the sentence to give me the emotion before the sentence came out, right? Because the emotion, the dialogue tag there, that Oren frowned, definitely conveys the emotion of the moment, which is really nice. And then this is nice too. Yes, they've launched their fighters. The reason I like, and Venus' tone was flat as she brushed her hair behind her ear. So putting the like dialogue tag back here at the end, giving us Venus' body language and letting us know who said that, is also great placement, that because it bounces right off of this one, right? Like, so do you seriously think whatever code is assassinating us? Yes, they've launched their fighters, right? Like, so they're right next to each other, which is a nice placement of those dialogue tags. And then here's another nice placement. Damn, gritting his teeth, Oren accelerated past what was comfortable, right? Like, so again, here we're getting that dialogue tag and body language in between the sentence, because the thoughts are disconnected, right? We have minutes at most. Now, what do you think I'm going to say about those 6 lines that we just looked at?
It should be a lot more.
Well, we only have 2 of your 4 characters talking.
Yeah.
right? Like we've totally lost Click and Nigel here. And this is a great place for Click to be clicking, right? Especially since here we're going to bring him, like start this thing about Click wants to take the controls in this piece here, right? Like she can't kill us. She needs us to code text. Do you seriously think whatever code is worth is bringing in? Yes. And they've launched their fighters. Click began to click and whir around, right? Like, damn, gritting his teeth, Orn accelerated. How long till they reach us? Click, clicked and turned bright red and like spun on his axis. I don't know what Click's moves are. We have minutes at most, right? Click, clicked again. Tell that thing to shut up. I'm trying to focus, right? Like we don't have time for games right now, right? Vena's like, I don't speak. Click, click, clicks again. Nigel materialized between the two seats, right? Like, so stretching it out like that and pulling it in and making sure you've got all four characters in there at one time, I think is really going to add to the nature of the discussion. Yeah. Any thoughts about that or anything?
Well, so should I introduce Nigel earlier in the scene? Because I just introduced him there.
No, I think it's good to introduce him here. You just need to tell us. Well,
and this
I'm torn.
A description of him at that point.
Yeah, I'm torn because you need to give us more about who he is.
Okay.
Right. So you could say like Nigel, the onboard AI, and just leave it at that. Or Nigel, the Victorian gentleman.
Well, he futzes with his clothing, and so I could have him futz with his.
Oh, that would be great. Yeah, you might say like Nigel, the onboard AI, materialized between the two seats, you know, straightening his coattails. I don't know what he's wearing, but straightening his coattails, or like, you know, dusting off his top hat, he said. And that would work. That would give us enough to start to form a picture in our head of who Nigel is.
Okay.
Right. Yeah, that would give us enough to start. And that would, the reason I'm hedging and saying you may want to introduce him earlier is because this is like you're building the emotional tension here, right? Like he's trying to escape an attack. There's some like fear here. So like adding those details is slowing the pace of the battle scene. So we might want to bring him in earlier. You may actually want to bring him in back at the beginning when Oren asks if Click can understand him. The end of that conversation would be a good moment to bring Nigel in.
Nigel, okay.
Yeah, because Nigel can, and you know, that's a great place to introduce that Nigel's going to complain about having to translate for Click. Like, this isn't my job, you know. And you can even have it up at the beginning of the piece where the tensions aren't so high. You can have Nigel say, like, describe himself, right? Like, my job is blah, 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 blah. I'm this kind of AI. I'm not intended to translate for, you know, small, odd aliens. And then have Oren say something like, you know, we're all doing jobs right now, Nigel, that we weren't trained for. This is this is part of the gig. You're in the ship, you got to roll, right? Like, and I'm just adding words there to make Oren's sentences longer. And then, you know, have Nigel say something like, or have click, and then have Nigel say something like, I just want to let it be known that I will be serving in this manner under protest, right? Like, yeah, I will be filing grievances later, right? Like, however you want to.
Yeah, I'll look up my Victorian dialogue.
Yeah, pull out. That's right. Go pull out Les Mis and start copying some of the dialogue. But yeah, so I think if you get him up earlier, it'll solve the problem of him appearing in the middle of a high tense scene, because it is that like emotional flow of the scene. Like, we want it building. So we want the dialogue to pick up and become snappier and snappier. And we want to, as we build to the chase, we want to start losing some of this in. some of the paragraphs of information and just get straight to the dialogue like you do here toward the end, which is nice. I did want, and I will say, you're going to have to start describing the sound of clicks.
Right.
And you may want to give him more than just a click. You know, I threw in like a purd in there, I think, at one point. The thing that makes I Am Groot work, right, for Guardians of the Galaxy, because you and I think we mentioned that before we started the recording, I don't remember. The thing that makes that phrase work is because he says it in 1,000 different ways.
Right.
Right. It's always the same words, but the intonation is different. So if you were writing it, you would always have to describe the intonation of that phrase, right? Like, I am Groot, he said angrily, right? Like, or like he pouted.
Can I pair that with colors?
I like that.
Colors?
I like that idea. That's a lot for you.
The more excited he is, the more bright and vivid the colors are. And when he's not excited, they get sort of lose their saturation.
Yeah, I like it. And I would actually think of, you know, if you think about how you're going to modulate his voice, you may want to assign a color to each emotion.
Yeah.
Mostly so that the reader can pick up on the pattern. So like if he's urgent, he's red, right? Like if he's calm, he's blue. If he's giddy, he's pink. You know, just figure out like what emotions are going to go with what color, and that would work. That would be a good, I could see that pulling off. You're still going to need to describe his clicks though. And you can, if you don't want to describe the tone of them all the time, you can describe the like nature of them, right? Like rapid fire clicks would describe like urgency, or 3 slow clicks could describe like dismissiveness, right? Like you could see him like click, click, click. And, and that would like, you know, describe that dismissiveness. It's almost like it, as we're talking about it, it feels a little like Morse code.
It does. That's what I was thinking.
Yeah, where you've got like, you know, the long beats and the short beats.
And I have code breakers in the ship.
Yeah. So that would be that could be a fun thing to play with a little bit. Clicks, the length and speed of clicks as represented by his emotion. He's got so many legs too. You also may want to give him some kind of like body language around what's happening with his legs. Yeah. Okay. So something I like that you did, that I just wanted to point out because you did it really well. The piece has the chapter has an emotional spike, right? They're running away. They're escaping, and we're kind of like at the neutral emotional level. And then the boss shows up and the emotions get a little bit higher. And then the tension gets a little bit higher. Fighters are released, emotions get a little bit higher. Click takes over and the ship goes a little crazy and the emotions kind of spike. And then Click like sends them into this cave and everything kind of chills out there at the end. I wanted it's a really nice emotional flow, and you do a great job. Like I could feel it as I read. I wanted a little more relief when they get into the cave. Have Oren needs to comment on Click's flying. Right? He needs
They don't know he's a child.
Yeah, they don't know he's a child.
There's no way they would have given a child control of this.
No. And Oren needs to comment on like, you know, that's the last time we do that. And Vina needs to say something like, what? We got here safe. You wouldn't have gotten us here. When Vina's only going to use a few words. So like, what? We got here safe. And then Oren needs to be like, that was irresponsible flying. This is the only ship we have. If he had run into something, we would have been crashed. And then the fighters wouldn't have even needed to get us. And then you need like Click to like, you know, Click in a mocking way. And you need Nigel to say something about like, I'm only going to translate. This is not my role, and I will only translate when it is absolutely necessary. You know, like some kind of comment about like, I'm not doing this all the time.
And Nigel can tell Click he's not going to translate that.
Yeah, I'm not going to. Yeah, well, that's nice. Yeah. That's excellent. And then you have Oren like kind of concede a little bit, right? Like, and that'll start to bring down that emotional flow so that we can like feel the kind of release of the tension a little bit from the fighter pilots. And then once we can release the tension a little bit and like bring down the whole like we just escaped death, then we can move into this conversation about like looking at the cave and being that kind of sense of awe and wonder. Because if I were to describe the emotional flow of the piece, I'd say like, you know, nervous to anxious to like urgent. And then at the end, we're ending in like awe and wonder.
Yeah.
And that urgent to awe and wonder needs that stepping stone down, right? Like we need to like relax it a little bit through conversation between the four of them. Yeah. And I think those are, Jeanette, I think those are the only thoughts I had for you. Anything else you want to talk about with the piece?
The only other thing I'm struggling a bit with is pronouns for click.
Yeah, you're using they.
I am using they.
Yeah,
I have given this to, the first book has gone to beta readers who thought click was a plural entity and could like split and do all sorts of things that I don't picture them doing. Which would be cool, but I didn't think of that, and I would have to rewrite everything.
Yeah.
And I know they is grammatically correct. I mean, they don't, because they don't know what goes on with click's species. But is it confusing? Because it doesn't seem right. And I know there's other pronouns, but they also don't seem quite right.
So let's get away from in the question, because I can't answer for you what's grammatically correct. Let's get away from grammatically correct and let's get into how do you want the reader. So pronouns are going to be used by Oren's perspective.
Yeah.
So two questions. How do you want the reader to feel about Oren's perspective on click? And how do you want Oren to feel about click?
Right.
After this scene. So answer the second one first. How does Oren feel about click?
Mildly frustrated, but grateful nonetheless.
Mildly frustrated, but grateful. Is he ever going to show his gratitude, or is he just going to like couch it?
He's going to couch it.
Okay. So mildly frustrated, refusing to show gratitude until we have that big emotional moment where Oren actually like extends the olive branch to click and they become friends. Yeah. Probably somewhere after the Dark Night of the Soul. If you're using the Save the Cat formula, which is the space opera, so you're not, because that's stretching all those beats out. I mean, maybe you are.
I haven't read the book yet. I have it sitting on my shelf.
Okay, so you're not. Yeah, so if Oren is frustrated, how is Oren going to talk about click's pronouns?
No, I know that in previous scenes, Vina has used they.
Okay.
And I kind of was assuming that Oren would just sort of continue on with that.
That could work.
Oren could certainly go with it and be that way for Oren's point of view character, point of view scenes. Oren
could talk about it. If Oren calls click it, how is Vina going to respond?
She'll be annoyed.
She'll be annoyed. Right. That's a great conversation there. How is Nigel going to respond?
You'll probably tell it it's not proper.
Yeah, it's not proper. But I could also see him refusing to explain what is proper because that's not his job. Well, so like, yeah. So you can, I would play with I would use the pronoun as a device to show how Oren is feeling and how everyone else is feeling about click. Right. Like, so because it doesn't click as an alien, it doesn't actually matter. Right. Like its pronouns are, right. Like we're not, if we were talking about a real people group, then I'd be concerned about like what is proper and what is not proper, right? Like, but this is an octopus, so we can do whatever we want with their pronouns. So I would have a game with it, especially since the tone is, action comedic. I would totally have a game with it, and I would have conversations about it. I would make it a running gag. You know, at some point you may want to have a big reveal of what Click's gender actually is, and then
I imagine it's complicated for aliens.
yeah, yeah. So, you know, or yeah, or maybe that is the answer. Doesn't matter. So yeah, so all that to say, I think play with it. I think bounce it around. I think Oren calling Click it is great because it demonstrates that, you know, Oren wants to dissociate himself in some way from this alien thing. And, you know, Vina calling it they is also great because she's trying to be, you know, respectful in some sense, and like it doesn't know if it's a he or she, so they is the natural like byproduct. And I think Nigel knowing clearly what the pronoun should be and then not telling anybody is also fantastic.
Yeah.
That's a fun, yeah. Uh, yeah, anyway, and I think Click, you know, sputtering when anybody says a pronoun is also fun because he clearly knows what it is,
Yeah.
or they clearly know what it is. Yeah, so yeah, I think that could be a good device. You have so much fun stuff going on in this book. This is fantastic. I love it. Oh, excuse me while I kick my dog out of my trash can with my feet. Okay. Yeah, that's great. Anything else you want to talk about? Buttercup's a great name for a ship too.
Well, it's a Winnebago, basically.
Yeah, it's nice.
It's yellow. It's actually painted yellow, inside and out.
That's really funny. That's great. I love it. And it reminded me of Princess Bride, which I have fond memories of. So it makes me go, oh, Buttercup. Yeah. Anything else we want to talk about with the piece?
Well, I think that's good for me.
All right. Thanks for letting me discuss it with you. It's really fun. I'm excited about it. I'm going to go. Have you already posted book one? You said it's with beta readers.
Yeah, it's actually going to the editor this week. So I'm hoping by the end of July, I'll be ready to start posting chapters.
Awesome. I'm totally reading it because this is fun. It sounds exciting. All right. Well, I'm going to stop the recording and we can just chat a little bit.
Okay.